Welcome back, everyone, to our final session today. The previous sessions and content gave us an honest look at how hard it is to move something from discovery to impact. It discussed the structural, institutional, and human obstacles that slow translation down, even when the science is ready. Which raises the question this panel is designed to sit with today, not how do we move faster through the existing system, but which problems are so important and so structurally difficult that they require MIT to help build something new. We have a fabulous group of panelists here. Elizabeth Engler brings us the perspective of rare diseases, neurobiology, where patients are few, urgency is high, and industry often doesn't go. She's the director of the Kirby Center and Program in Neurobiology at Boston Children's, and professor of neurology, ophthalmology, Harvard Medical School, Howard Hughes HHMI investigator, no, Howard Hughes Medical Institute investigator, sorry. The day has been long. And a member of the Broad Institute. Venu Gopinathan brings the hardware layer where the sensors and semiconductors that make medicine measurable are being reinvented. Venu is vice president of analog devices, and John Parker brings the question of what actually gets funded and why. And John Parker is at Springwood Ventures. And this is a productive tension, I imagine. We're very fortunate to have Maria Yang, MIT's Vice Provost for Faculty, and William E. Leonhard, Professor of Engineering, guiding this conversation. Maria, the stage is yours, panelists.
So welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. We have spent the day today thinking about the future of health and well-being in real time, from molecular sequencing to maternal fetal modeling to AI-enabled diagnostics. So for this closing session, we are going to ask a bigger question, which is, what breakthroughs are truly within reach in the next decade, and what must we do now to accelerate them responsibly? So no pressure, but we're going to try to bring it all together. And I am thrilled to be joined by three leaders whose perspectives span clinical science, industry innovation, and investments. So we're very fortunate to have Elizabeth, Venu, and John here. So I'm going to dive right in, and we're going to have this opening round of big breakthroughs. So we're going to start off on a high energy note, and I will ask you, and maybe we'll go Elizabeth, Venu, and John. If you had to bet on one breakthrough in an area that will fundamentally reshape human health in the next decade, what would it be? And what inflection point makes you confident about that? And Elizabeth?
I get to go first?
You get to go first.
I won't say I say this with confidence. Mm-hmm. However, I think what we really want to work through is the movement from symptomatic treatment to prevention and prediction of disease. And that will require understanding all of human adult disease as well as pediatric disease, and understanding the biomarkers and the early indications such that we can treat prenatally or early postnatally and basically eradicate a lot of current disorders that are present. I think 10 years may be a little short for that, but the inflection points include a lot of things we've heard about today. They include not just being able to provide whole genome sequence on everyone, but understanding it and understanding that junk DNA we heard about, which is going to be so critical. It's going to include understanding the ability of AI to drive a lot of discoveries and to do a lot of interpretation that we are not, to manage data that we're not yet able to manage. And I think that we also have to continue the scientific advances, a lot of which have done at places like MIT, where we develop the technologies that can go into the clinic that allow us to then do that early treatment. And so it is rather audacious to anticipate this, but I think that should be our goal over the next decade or two.
That's great. Thank you. Venu?
So I don't want to belabor the point of AI, which I'm sure is mentioned in every minute in this conversation, right? So But I want to pull up something that we notice in the industry, and that is more and more as AI gets used, there is a certain what I call democratization of innovation. There are a lot of lower levels of innovation that gets done by AI, which doesn't need a whole lot of people to invent the little things. In the health sciences, I feel that is going to be transformative because there is a lot of things that can be done if caught early in healthcare, can be managed by simple things. And those simple things are stuff that AI will be able to do. So what I'm really hoping is that there will be a lot of virtual healthcare professionals, not necessarily specialists, who will be able to take care of our health without having to turn up in a hospital after it becomes really hard to do. So that's my hope and goal. That's on the healthcare side of it. I'm also quite excited about the confluence of drug discovery and scale at which stuff can happen, which is really the place where my company works very closely. That is almost unbelievable, and I can't wait to see what scaled AI-based searches of the field of molecules that can do a lot of fantastic things that can't be done today can do in the future. So that is interesting to me.
Optimism, that's fantastic. John?
So I'm going to be a little repetitive here, but some of the things that we hear all the time in our society today are, well, we have sick care, not health care. And this is a problem, and healthcare is a huge burden on the system. We are taking care of people later in life, not earlier. I think there's a real opportunity right now to move upstream. Elizabeth talked about this a little bit. I think we can move upstream to get earlier in life and to make the economics, I'll bring in that investor perspective, which is not just investor, but economics, to make that work. And we may be at a point where that can start to happen a little bit. Why? Putting money and getting paid for prevention is very difficult. But we're starting to get to the point where the people who are paying for our health care are starting to see ways to do that in a way that they're getting value on that money. And it's not just, it's really hard for people to, for example, to do whole genome sequencing on every baby that's born. The numbers don't work out right now. But we're starting to get those tools to tell us where the ones we should be testing are. That's really exciting. If we can start to chip away at that and get in front of healthcare needs of people early in life, move upstream, that's going to be really exciting. And that allows a major shift in how we think of healthcare or instead of sick care. So I'm excited by that. The data is starting to emerge. The technologies are emerging. I know there's one thing that came up earlier today, and I haven't thought about how to do this, but quantum computing, I don't know how you use quantum computing for pediatrics, but I do know that there are a lot of variables that go into figuring out a health trajectory for a person. And that gets really exciting when you can start to pull that in on an N of one basis and start to figure out and get in front of problems.
Early, this is fantastic. And I feel the energy here, right? Quantum, like we're just bringing in, thinking earlier on preventively. So that's a huge change. Appreciate these perspectives. Okay, so all day, and this is building on some of what we've heard today, all day we've heard about the convergence of biology, computation, and advanced sensing. So AI-enabled sequencing, predictive models of human systems, semiconductor-based diagnostics. So let's explore this more directly, and you've already started alluding to this. What do you see as the most promising or exciting applications of AI to human health, and what barriers must we overcome to make these successful? And maybe we'll start with Venu this time.
Yeah, if I were to pick one, it's the use of AI in the discovery of new medicines. Nothing new, right? But I'd just like to phrase it a little bit more in a slightly longer lens, which is there are 10 to the 50 or so molecules, and some of them will become drugs. And until today, we have, heuristics and intuition and what is it, the Pfizer the five things that you can use to figure out something would be a drug or not. That has changed. And the fact that if you can get enough amount of the right data, and I think I want to emphasize the word right data, then AI can tell you which way to go search. I think that is a major change. I come from the semiconductor field. There is a famous law called Moore's Law, where there is an inverse of Moore's Law, which is called Eroom's Law, wherein the price of a drug doubles every 9 years. So it's literally Moore written backwards. And every time I see an exponential, I feel, hey, there is something that can be done on that direction. So to me, the ability to search cleverly with the right amount of data, figure out how the molecule will turn around so that you know that is going to be a good target, predict failures early before billions of dollars have gone in because you can still use AI. Those three axes is fascinating.
That is fantastic. So AI can really enable those.
That's what I think.
Fantastic.
It's a search problem.
It's a search problem. Yeah, you make it sound so easy. But John, from the investment side, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, one of the things we're thinking about a lot is you can throw a lot of AI at a lot of different things right now. But we're trying to find those areas that are going to draw sort of the alignment of all the stakeholders, which, for better or worse, a lot of it is around who's going to pay for this. So I think we've seen, I'll use the word hype. We have seen some things out there which are, hey, let's just throw a new chatbot in the hands of some clinicians, and not to take away from Vinny's point, but I have seen a lot of things around AI drug discovery that, great, we identified a new molecule, but how are you going to get it there? So to try to find some things that will create a whole package around, whether it's, again, with the drug, that lower, the whole package, how do you get it all the way through approvals and into the marketplace and manufactured and all those things, and lower the cost of that from start to finish so it's an affordable drug that can attract investment, in my world, for a lot of smaller market drugs. But we're also seeing this on the other side around earlier diagnosis, where if we've got a company that's going in and using claims data to identify rare disease patients from certain sets and say, hey, we know these patients are going to go on very long diagnostic odysseys. Let's get in front of that. We can identify the patients using the data, and then we can get them to the right specialist. We can sequence. We can do all the different things with the small group of patients who really need it. And the payers are embracing this all of a sudden. So that becomes a really different kind of approach. We're saying, if we get the person who's paying for this on board, we can start to get some traction and move it forward. You also need the clinicians and everybody else too. But we're really starting to focus on some of trying to get that whole stakeholder assessment to what AI can bring to this. So.
That sounds so exciting. And Elizabeth, how about in the clinical or hospital setting?
So I think everyone acknowledges the benefits of AI for so much of the technology that enters into the hospital. I would really repeat what Barry said about the use of AI in the hospital, that, for example, Children's is very much what we call a human-centered AI usage. We're very risk-averse, and so by definition, it takes a lot of partnership to accept AI. It's used in the mundane ways that, they're not really mundane. It was used in the ways already mentioned. We use them for patient notes, so that if one is more comfortable just talking to a patient rather than having to be a scribe, it will be your scribe. It will summarize, and we get second opinions and third opinions that come in with hundreds of pages of patient data, and AI can now go through and summarize that for us, which is a huge, huge time savings. And there are other ways that they're clear, I think, clear time savings. I think that there was an estimate, I actually got the number down, that I think in November, it was estimated at Children's that just those AI interventions saved about 3,000 hours of physician time. And most recently, Open Evidence was approved, which is this AI science differential diagnosis and treatment algorithm based on literature. So we can now use that. I think that the main thing, though, is that this is a partnership, and that clinical judgment and domain expertise are still very critical. So I think Barry said it most nicely when he said that we need to, AI can take over everything in a way that enhances the patient-clinician interaction rather than detracts from it. And I think we need basically trust in education, as been mentioned, and we need to have validation in that almost the equivalent of the introduction of a new AI intervention needs to be treated like a clinical trial and has to be proved that it's actually trustworthy and better than the standard of care in order to really be able to implement it. And even then, it will take a lot of education and a lot of trust to get there, I think. So we are the most conservative amongst, the entire Boston area, the physician scientists or the physicians who have to use and implement these things. Yeah.
So you have to build that trust into the whole process. That makes a lot of sense. So actually, my follow-up question, so across the answers, do you see MIT uniquely positioned to help lead sort of the next steps in these spaces? Are there things that you think MIT can play a particular role in? And maybe we'll start again with Venu. And
Go ahead.
Start with me.
Yeah.
Well, Venu would be great, yeah.
Yeah. The future, I think, is it's a very multidisciplinary. What I see is that the future of the marriage of medicine and technology and AI is a very multidisciplinary thing. And the risk one runs it. I mean, I think a professor at MIT put it perfectly once, which was engineers tend to do what they want to do rather than what they should do. There's a nice ring to that. It actually came from somebody here probably, and so I don't want to take credit for it. It's the doctors, it's the physicians that actually keep the engineers honest on what is the right problem to be solved. So I think things like HEALS, wherein there is a strong connection between the clinical community and the engineering community that is able to define the right set of problems, is phenomenally. Where else in the whole planet can you find two of the best institutions in the world on these two things across a river? I mean, it's just a unique place to pull this off. So,
perfect answer. That's wonderful. John, do you have any?
Yeah, one of the things that we've really enjoyed working with MIT on is it's the internal interdisciplinary approach that's taken here, which is really interesting, but also for us, how to find an institution we can work with who has the ability to work with hospitals all over. I'll say, not all over Boston, all over the country. It's all over the world. But it's not just hospitals. And that's an important thing for us. And it's work. There aren't a lot of academic institutions with life science and healthcare expertise that aren't locked into their own hospital. Really unique from that perspective. But also the ability to embrace industry, startups, work with and talk with governments, and to do this on a global basis. We've been looking for ways, and I'll say at the Hood Foundation, I think we went on probably a decade-long journey to find a partner to be really catalytic around pediatrics with. And we had some false starts, and we looked at people, and it was really interesting that we ended up finding our partner right across the river, so close to us, and it took us a decade to do it, but sometimes that happens. But it has all the right ingredients so that we can actually start to move the needle, because you can't do it in isolation. I've seen this happen with very narrow grants, in particular in a lab, in a hospital, or even within one hospital, where there's always too much focus on what's the innovation. We have to get our stuff out there. We have to do it, and the incentives and the need, it's very real, and not to criticize anybody for doing that, but we were looking for somebody who could think above that and work with all the different groups. And we found that here. So we're really excited about it. It's early days.
We're very excited about it too.
This is the place that can make that happen. So.
That's fantastic, and we were hoping.
Yep.
Yes, that's fantastic to hear. Elizabeth.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a whole lot to add, except that I guess coming into this, I thought, something that would be, the HEALS program would be perfect. And then I learned today that there is a program called HEALS. So I can't really propose it because it already exists, but I think it's a terrific opportunity to take the richness of MIT and help undergrads and graduate students and postdocs understand the questions that are relevant. And we have these amazing hospitals, amazing biotech, amazing venture capital, where they can go and learn how to ask questions, what questions to ask, how to apply their interests to their research directly. And it's just that ecosystem we've heard so much about today. So one of the, in addition to the brilliant minds at MIT, its location is, I think, critical to its continuing to contribute.
That is fabulous to hear. And I will tell you, the entire HEALS team was they all did a little silent cheer when you said that.
It's like, oh, too bad we didn't know about it. Yeah.
Yes, no, that's fantastic. Okay, so our next area is precision medicine. We've seen extraordinary progress in individualized care, and I think some of you have alluded to that already so far, but scaling that innovation equitably remains one of the biggest challenges. So what innovations, technical, clinical, or policy, are needed to bring precision care to millions rather than just thousands? And maybe we can start with Elizabeth from your view of the clinic.
In the clinic, yeah. So, we've had a lot of experience at Boston Children's with N-of-1 trials. I think ASOs have maybe had their day and they'll start to diminish, but I think that there are amazing opportunities for interventions. And I want to use one example, which is the example historically of what's happened with spinal muscular atrophy. So spinal muscular atrophy, or SMA, is often an infantile fatal disorder in which the motor neurons die. And its genetic etiology was discovered in around 1995. It is mutations in a gene called SMN1, but there's a duplication of SMN1 called SMN2. SMN2 is in humans, not in mice, and its duplication only produces about 10% of the protein because it splices out a critical exon that we have in SMN1. So it took from 1995 till about 2011 to do amazing genetic and basic science and animal studies leading into clinical trials for us based on the genetic discovery of the gene. And then around 2011, I think there were clinical trials, and the first therapy came out in 2018. And that was an ASO that is given intrathecally, which means you have to do a lumbar puncture on the child, and it has to be given over and over again. It's for life. And you can imagine that it has very little there's nothing equitable about that treatment. It not only overwhelmed Boston Children's, let alone being available anyplace else in the world, but it's incredibly effective. And suddenly these children lived who had previously died. 2 years later, the next therapy came out, which was a gene therapy that actually corrects SMN1. And the ASO actually, if I didn't mention that, actually corrects the splicing in SMN2, so you make more SMN2, and so you recover. The second therapy treated SMN1 directly, and it's terrific. It's a gene therapy. It's treated probably 4,000 children now effectively, but it costs about $2.1 million per child and has to be done, obviously, in an experienced hospital setting. So that was 2020, if I've got my dates right. And then 2 years later came out the third treatment, which is an oral treatment. It is given daily, which is a disadvantage, but it is an oral therapy that corrects the splicing deficit as well. And so now we have a therapy that can be given without other intervention, can be shipped, is very deliverable. It has from what I've read, it has one big problem, which is that it needs to be refrigerated. It's not temperature stable, so that it suddenly limits the ability to treat people worldwide who do not have refrigeration. And so it's a great example of taking something from the genetics through multiple different therapies, and each therapy improves the ability to treat more people more equitably, theoretically at less cost. And I imagine that we're going to reach a point now where the next thing for it, or for maybe sickle cell, will be to find a small molecule that does exactly the same thing, that's temperature stable and can be a one-time dose. And I think that's where science needs to go, right? So we just keep on trying to use what we've learned from all of these Ns of one or these rare disorders, and use the knowledge we gain, the proof of feasibility, to move more and more towards treatments that are able to be provided worldwide.
That is an amazing story just to think about in the space of 25 years or 30 years.
30 years, yeah.
That's amazing. John, do you have any thoughts on personalized medicine? Or precision medicine, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to think where we were going to go with this one.
So the idea is, what innovations are needed to sort of scale this from thousands to millions of people?
Yeah. So one of the things that I'll get to, I think, when I'm thinking about this is the policy piece, actually.
Yeah.
So one of the things in my world, again, precision medicine, and I'm thinking about this from the perspective of you need to go younger and younger, you need to get people early in life, prevent, and all of that. Our system is not designed to support that early intervention. So kids in this country are predominantly taken care of by Medicaid, not Medicare. Medicare reimburses at a higher rate. It is a federal system. It's one system. Medicaid is 54 systems, actually, I guess, and it reimburses it at a lower rate. It's different in every state. Dealing with that in terms of getting paid for whatever you're going to build, creates a huge barrier to reaching patients in this age group, which is where you need to go if you're doing precision medicine and you're really trying to get out and prevent disease. So how we get to this, to change the perspective in this country around having policy in place that supports some of these, this new approach. It's a bit of a challenge. We're a short-term thinking country, and it's the nature of it. And I say that not to just be critical of it, although I am, but the reality is on the business side, we think in terms of quarterly earnings reports. In Washington, they can think out, it's sort of 2-year election cycles, which means as soon as one's over, you're starting on another. It's very hard to think long term, and when you're talking about early intervention, you need people who are thinking generationally. So, and we see this with a lot of the things in the pediatrics space where there's tremendous bipartisan support, but it just never gets to the top of the list. It's never today's problem, and it's never what's going to get you reelected. It's never what's going to bring the money in today. So this is what I focus on a lot. There are some really good programs out there that help support some of these things. We just need more. And it's not, one of the main programs we see in pediatrics is the Priority Review Voucher Program, which provides a financial incentive for creating a drug for a rare pediatric disease. It's been an incredibly successful program, even though it was stopped for a year, but it's just got renewed again, very successful. But that's only one thing, and that's just drugs. So how do you start to bring that kind of thinking? And we don't even need these financial incentives. We actually just need a level playing field that makes it so it's just as profitable to take care of people early in life as late in life. So sorry, I get my soapbox on that one, but it's an important area that will help support everything else we're trying to do.
Right, if we start with younger people being healthier, that is a foundation.
Yep, and it's the economics of it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a new to me perspective, so that's a fantastic, thank you. Venu.
Yeah, I have to shamelessly plug my own company.
Good.
So we are in the business of sensing and semiconductor stuff. Very uniquely, we are an industry whose job it is to make what we make cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, incredibly cheaper, right? It's a strange industry. We try to kill ourselves, and that's how we make money, in a strange way. But that has an interesting byproduct when it comes to medicine. And I kind of like the fact that I'm in that industry because, and inside the company, we ask a very simple question. If every doctor could see every one of his or her patients every day in the morning, could you change the trajectory of a disease? Not diagnose, but the management of the disease. Often the answer is yes. But even today, most of the money that we spend is on management, not necessarily the diagnosis side of it. Heart failure is a great example. And so that's where the promise is. If we could, and before I start, I'm not a big fan of the current watches and all the toys that we call medical devices, but take that aside, it would be great to be able to have non-invasive sensing of anything that you can look at. You look at a mirror and it tells you if there's something else wrong with you. If you're in a Zoom call, by looking at how your eyes move, you can figure out whether there's a cognitive impairment in your brain. Those ways wherein you marry phenomenal sensing technologies with great algorithms that tell you something that is going to go bad before it really requires expensive acute care. To me, that changes the access of healthcare. To me, that is the strongest way in which you can make healthcare much more available to not just the United States, a rich country, to also developing countries where simple things are just lost.
That is fascinating. So sort of this instrumented monitor
Yeah,
world.
without being intrusive.
Without, yes, privacy, there's all, yes. But still, medical care all the time.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you. The third frontier we want to explore in all of this is interdisciplinary partnerships, combining health, life sciences, and everything from manufacturing to quantum, which you brought up earlier, to climate. MIT has massive strengths here. Where do you see opportunities for interdisciplinary innovation with the biggest impacts in the next decade? And John, we'll start with you.
Yeah. We've touched on a lot of them today, I think. But when I think about this problem, when I think about any innovation that we might be trying to emerge, what I will tell entrepreneurs or innovators as they're doing this is really thinking about the full cycle of what it takes to get this idea all the way to the patient sustainably and at scale. And that requires thinking about all the different stakeholders in it, so it becomes an interdisciplinary problem from the outset for almost anything you're going to develop, because you have to be talking, you're going to, whether it's an engineer or a biologist, whether, whatever you're developing, but then you do have to talk to clinical people, you have to talk to patients, you've got to talk to the people around the economics, so it might be payers or the hospital if they're buying it. But it brings in, again, things like, when you think about an MIT, Department of Economics, to be able to get the thinking from all the different departments to make that work, it's inherently required if you're going to succeed. Because if you don't think those things through, you're going to hit a wall after you've spent a bunch of money trying to get there, and then that leads to a much higher risk of failure. So I always like that perspective. The other bit is, I love it when you get creativity from things you didn't see. And so we mentioned climate, and I've seen this, and I think about this a lot with my world of pediatrics, saying it's really interesting what they did in the climate world, whereas they have this big industry, energy, and this fringe group of green tech people came along and from nothing created a fairly substantial industry out of this as part or related to energy. I feel like my area, and there are a lot of these other areas that are sort of overlooked, or they're sort of niche unmet needs as part of healthcare. We've seen women's health have some great success in this. I'm hoping to see this in pediatrics, but it's sort of, you look to an example like a climate, clean tech revolution, and how do we learn from that? So you can, there are areas well outside of what we do we can learn a lot from. At least we try.
So these new approaches of insurgency maybe are revolutionizing. That's fantastic. Thank you. Next, Elizabeth, do you have any thoughts on clinical implications on partnerships and connecting?
I mean, obviously, many of the engineering and the quantum work and the discoveries, the wearables, everything that occurs here at MIT has incredible potential for application in the clinic, and so I think I would just, as putting my clinician hat on, I would just emphasize what HEALS is already doing, which is the incredible importance that if you're interested in this kind of work, you start early to actually understand what the questions are and what the needs are, right? So you can, instead of, and this has been mentioned earlier today, instead of discovering something incredible and then trying to find an application for it, ask questions, have patients at the table, go on rounds, be present on the clinical side to know what are the questions that actually matter and need to be addressed, and what are the potential pitfalls that you need to be aware of early. And the sooner you start that, the better, the more comfortable you are. Clinical language is different than scientific language, and so becoming comfortable with communicating with clinicians is in itself something that takes some practice. But it is overcomable, and I would encourage that. I know the HEALS program has started doing this, and I would just encourage even strengthening this. And I would suggest that I actually don't know the relationship. I was just asking earlier between MIT and MGB, but I would assure you, having trained at the M, at the B, and other institutes around the area, there are other hospitals and not only in Boston, but more widely, that would be awesome. So the seed grants, for example, would be awesome to have those at Boston Children's as well as at MGB. Not that MGB doesn't have pediatric patients, but we have other things we deal with at Children's. And I think that all of this kind of collaboration just requires bringing down silos, right? We're siloed within MIT, we're siloed within Children's, and then we're siloed across all of these institutions. So figuring out ways to bring down silos, to share intellectual property, to share promotion criteria, to find ways that there aren't as many barriers to such institutional, interdepartmental, and interinstitutional collaborations, I think will just go a long way. It just takes time.
Time, yes, and will, absolutely. Thank you. Venu, what technological infrastructure do we need to enable these sorts of partnerships?
Could you repeat? Technology?
What technological infrastructure, sort of to enable partnerships? What do you, or anything broadly related to that question as well?
Yeah. Let me see if I can sort of pull that question a little broader. The topic was around interdisciplinary work, right? And one of the fascinating things that has happened in the last maybe couple of years is there are a lot of science-limited innovations in, especially medicine, precision medicine happen. And often you see that it is not just the interdisciplinary that happens between engineering and medicine, it is also between fundamental sciences within MIT, for example, biology and physics and things like that. I think that's something that is fascinating to us. And MIT is very uniquely positioned because it has phenomenally good departments at the basic sciences level, which is where a lot of these really earth-shaking things do take place. It takes time to come out. To take John's point, it takes a lot of time, but it actually happens there too. Coming to the thing, infrastructure-wise, I would have liked to have seen is some mechanism by which the data, the wonderful data that can be mined, that is taken in one place, could be democratized for others to also utilize this, so that the collective intelligence of the humankind can come in to do it and not be sort of held up by this university or a location or something. I haven't got an answer to that because there's a lot of money to be made in all of these things. But somewhere I feel that if there is a way to make a reasonable amount of money, this might actually get out, the genie may get out and might make sense. 20 years ago, who would have thought open source would have worked? But today it is, right? So there is still hope. So that's the infrastructure, something that makes data a little bit more accessible without being caught in the financial labyrinth would be good.
That is a fantastic point important point about this sort of accessibility and broadening. And actually, it's really interesting how interconnected a lot of the things you're saying today, all day today, really are. And so I'm gonna do a lightning round if you're ready for this. So I'm gonna ask you each for one rapid fire thought. In one sentence, where is MIT uniquely positioned to lead in the world in health innovation over the next decade? And if you're a little over one sentence, that's okay. But yes, if you're gonna, and so I will start. Let's start actually with Venu, if you would like to.
Tell me the question again. This is lightning.
Yeah, I know, it's lightning. It's a lot of high stakes. High stakes. So in one sentence, but actually you can have a little bit more. Where is MIT uniquely positioned to lead the world in health innovation in the next decade?
Oh, I think I answered that.
Oh.
One of the unique places where there is phenomenal source of problems with medical institutions nearby.
Yeah.
In world's best engineering institute, and probably the world's best basic sciences institute. Nothing can beat that.
Excellent, thank you. We agree, so absolutely. What do you think, Elizabeth?
We're going to be very repetitive here. I think that it's the brilliant minds of MIT combined with the location, the ecosystem it exists in is what's going to make all the difference. So.
Thank you, that's great. John?
it would be repetitive, and I think I sort of said something to that effect before, so I'll change it to a little different answer than what I was going to say. I think there is the potential here to turn sort of conventional wisdom upside down, which doesn't happen. It doesn't happen automatically here or anywhere, but there's a good chance here. And there's a little bit of a hint of it for folks who are here in the morning with Newbar's comment around, how do you do the extraordinary and how do you move past reasonable thinking? And so if there are people here who can drive that kind of thinking, how do you turn the equation upside down, think about something completely differently? We have to do this in my world all the time where everyone's like, well, you've got to go to adults and then you do kids, or it's going to cost $1 billion to develop a drug. Well, don't take that for granted. Think about, wait, it's not going to work if we do it the conventional way. So how do we rethink this? This is a great place to get that creativity of thinking. So, and I encourage people to do that.
That is such a great note to wrap things up on. Perfect, thank you. So, actually, I do have an optional piece of advice, since given our audience here today. What is one piece of advice you'd offer our next generation of MIT innovators, if you were going to give them some advice? And maybe we'll start, we'll go in reverse order. So, Elizabeth, if you're going to give advice to someone in this room about what next steps to take to be an innovator?
Well, I guess based on the last year or so, I'd be prepared to be unprepared. But I think to remain hopeful and to really follow your passion. I mean, I think it's so important that you don't do what you think you should do, but you do what your body and your mind wants you to do. So finding what really excites you, the rhythms, the channels, what it is that works for you, and then pursue your work based on that. And you'll probably be happiest and most productive.
Thank you. That's great. Great advice. Venu?
For the students, you said?
For students or any we have entrepreneurs and we also have people online, so there's a big mix of people.
I was going to say, keep the nerd coefficient alive.
Keep the nerd.
But the nerd coefficient alive, but that's not right. I think going forward, I honestly think, it would be great if the students don't take any advice from older people. just do what you feel like doing. The world is very different from what we had seen 10 years ago. Just chart your own path.
So don't ignore us. Okay.
Ignore us.
That's good.
Just take our money.
Just take our money. And John?
This is Health and Life Science Collaborative. We do it presumably not just to publish some papers or get some awards. So I would encourage people to think about patients and how you help real people in the real world and get whatever it is you're working on, which is amazing, but how do you get it there? And if you only get it part way, it was all a waste. Get it to the patients. And I say that, there are learnings from every step of the process, but keep the end game in mind. How are you going to impact the world?
Perfect ending. Thank you very much. So thank you, Elizabeth, Venu, and John. That was an amazing session. I can see Angela is beaming, which tells me that this is beyond expectation. So we thank you. We really feel like this is just a great way of ending the sessions, and we thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Katharina's up next.
A little over a year ago, on December 4th, we held the HEALS launch. It was a beginning, and as President Kornbluth said this morning, beginnings are easy to be excited about. What is harder is showing up for everything that comes after, the grant cycles, the collaborations that might take longer to form than anyone hoped, the students who need mentorship at inconvenient times, and the work that doesn't announce itself. So what I named just briefly is what actually happened this year as a reflection. We funded seed grants. We launched a postdoctoral fellowship program. We supported graduate fellows. We began a Super Europe program and are building from it a clinical innovators track. We launched initiatives. Together, we helped launch initiatives that are opening new pathways in pediatric innovation, in semiconductor-enabled health technologies, in deep partnerships with Mass General Brigham and Boston Children's, and in areas of medicine that have long been underexplored. And we brought the people in this room into the same conversation. None of that was inevitable. It was made. And it was made by the people here in the room. This morning, Angela asked you to hold one person in mind, one conversation you haven't had yet. And I want to make that concrete, not a follow-up email next week, not a meeting you schedule. Tonight at the poster session, find that person, walk to them, say one sentence you have been wanting to say, and form that new connection you've been wanting to form. This is not a small thing. Many of the collaborations that change fields begin exactly that way, not with a grant or a formal partnership that comes later, but with someone deciding to close the distance. An event like this, this was your homework, the slide that goes with it. An event like this today requires an enormous amount of work that happens almost entirely out of view. I want to thank the teams at MIT Video Productions, Conference Services, Institute Events, the Office of Resource Development, the MIT Alumni Association, the Office of Innovation and Strategy, Studio 105. And I want to thank the HEALS Programming Committee whose collective thinking shaped everything you experienced today. I also want to thank our faculty, students, clinicians, industry partners, and advisory board members for helping build this community from the inside out. I also want to thank our team members, especially Liz and Marcia and Caroline, who've spent countless hours really combining all the information that you needed to get here today and to hear the presentations and the panels. One last thing, a room full of people who are generally curious about each other's work, who are actually willing to be changed by what they hear, is rarer than it probably should be. And many of the most interesting ideas in science emerge exactly at those edges where disciplines meet and people start asking questions together. You were that today. Thank you. The reception is now open, and so is the poster session, where our students and undergraduate researchers are waiting to show you what they've been up to. This is HEALS in its full breadth, the work that is happening at the bench, at the bedside, and every stage in between. Don't miss it. Now go find your person.